Anne Frank, bottom of page 123. Tuesday, October 10th, 1943. Dearest Kitty, a new idea during meals. I talk more to myself than to the others, which has two advantages. First, they're glad they don't have to listen to my continuous chatter, and second, I don't have to get annoyed by their opinions. I don't think my opinions are stupid, but other people do. So, it's better to keep them to myself. I apply the same tactic when I have to eat something I loathe. I put the dish in front of me, pretend it's delicious, avoid looking at it as much as possible, and it's gone before I've had time to realize what it is. When I get up in the morning, another very disagreeable moment, I leap out of bed, think to myself, you'll be slipping back under the cover soon, walk to the window, take down the black outscreen, sniff at the crack until I feel a bit of fresh air and I'm awake. I strip the bed as fast as I can so I won't be tempted to get back in. Do you know what Mother calls this sort of thing? The art of living. Isn't that a funny expression? We've all been a little confused this past week because our dearly beloved Western bells have been carted off to be melted down for the war, so we have no idea of the exact time, either night or day. I still have hopes that they'll come up with a substitute made of tin or copper or some such thing to remind the neighborhood of the clock. Everywhere I go, upstairs or down, they all cast admiring glances at my feet, which are adorned by a pair of exceptionally beautiful, for times like these, shoes. We managed to snap them up for 27.50 guilders, burgundy-colored suede and leather with medium-sized high heels. I feel as if I'm on stilts and look even taller than I already am. Yesterday was my unlucky day. I pricked my right thumb with the blunt end of a big needle. As a result, Margot had to peel potatoes for me, take the good with the bad, and writing was awkward. Then I bumped into a cupboard door so hard it nearly knocked me over and was scolded for making such a racket. They wouldn't let me run water to bathe my forehead, so now I'm walking around with a giant lump over my right eye. To make matters worse, the little toe on my right foot got stuck in the vacuum cleaner. It bled and hurt, but my mother's ailments were already causing me so much trouble that I let this one slide, which was stupid of me because now I'm walking around with an infected toe. What with the salve, the gauze, and the tape, I can't get my heavenly new shoes on my foot. Dussel has put us in danger for the umpteenth time. He actually had me bring him a book, an anti-Mussolini tirade, which has been banned. On the way here, she was knocked down by an SS motorcycle. She lost her head and shouted, "You brutes!" and went on her way. I don't dare think what would have happened if she'd been taken down to headquarters. Yours, Anne. A daily chore in our little community, peeling potatoes. One person goes to get some newspapers, another the knives, keeping the best for himself, of course, the third the potatoes, and the fourth the water. Mr. Dussel begins. He may not always peel them very well, but he does peel nonstop, glancing left and right to see if everyone is doing it the way he does. No, they're not. Look, Anne, I'm taking peeler in my hand like this, so, and going from the top to the bottom. Not so, but so. I think my way is easier, Mr. Dussel, I say tentatively, but this is the best way, Anne. This you can take from me, of course. It is no matter. You do the way you want. We go on peeling. I glance at Dussel out of the corner of my eye, lost in the thought. He shakes his head over me, no doubt, but says no more. I keep on peeling, then I look at Father on the other side of me. To Father, peeling potatoes is not a chore, but precision work. When he reads, he has a deep wrinkle in the back of his head, but then he's preparing potatoes, beans, or vegetables. He seems to be totally absorbed in his task. He puts on his potato peeling face, and when it's set in that particular way, it would be impossible for him to turn out anything less than a perfectly peeled potato. I keep on working. I glance up for a second, but that's all the time I need. Miss Van D is trying to attract Dussel's attention. She starts by looking in his direction, but Dussel pretends not to notice. She winks, but Dussel goes on peeling. She laughs, but Dussel still doesn't look up. Then Mother laughs too, but Dussel pays them no mind. Having failed to achieve her goal, Miss Van D is obliged to change tactics. There's a brief silence. Then she says, "Putty, why don't you put on an apron? Otherwise I'll have to spend all day tomorrow trying to get the spots on your suit." "I'm not getting dirty." Another brief silence. "Putty, why don't you sit down?" "I'm fine this way. I like standing up." Silence. "Putty, look out. Despochgront." "I know, Mommy, but I'm being careful." Mr. Van D casts about for another topic. "Tell me, Pooty, why aren't the British carrying out any bombing raids today? Because the weather's bad, Curly." "But yesterday was such a nice weather, and they weren't flying then either." "Let's drop the subject." "Why? Can't a person talk about that or offer an opinion?" "No." "Well, why in the world not?" Oh, be quiet, Mr. Frank always answers his wife. Mr. Van D is trying to control himself. Mr. Mark always rubs him the wrong way, but Miss Van D is not one to quit. Oh, there's never going to be an invasion. Mr. Van D turns white, and when she notices it, Miss Van D turns red. But she's not about to be deterred. The British aren't doing a thing. The bomb burst. And now, shut up! Don't know. Mother can barely stifle a laugh, and I stare straight ahead. Scenes like these are repeated almost daily, unless they've just had a terrible fight. In that case, neither Mr. nor Miss Van D says a word. It's time for me to get some more potatoes. I go up to the attic, where Peter is busy picking fleas from the cat. He looks up and the cat notices it, and whoosh, he's gone. Out the window and into the rain gutter. Peter swears. I laugh and slip out of the room. Freedom in the Annex. 5:30, Bep's arrival signals the beginning of our nightly freedom. Things get going right away. I go upstairs with Bep, who usually has her dessert before the rest of us. The moment she sits down, Miss Van D begins stating her wishes. Her list usually starts with, "Oh, by the way, Bep, something else I'd like." Bep winks at me. Miss Van D doesn't miss a chance to make her wishes known to whoever comes upstairs. It must be one of the reasons none of them like to go up there. 5:45, Bep leaves. I go down 2 floors to have a look around. First to the kitchen, then to the private office, and then to the coal bin to open the cat door for Mushi. After a long tour of inspection, I wind up in Mr. Kugler's office. Mr. Van D is combing all the drawers and files for today's mail. Peter picks up Bushi and the warehouse key. Pim lugs the typewriters upstairs. Margot looks around for a quiet place to do her office work. Miss Van D puts a kettle of water on the stove. Mother comes down the stairs with a pan of potatoes. We all know our jobs. Soon Peter comes back from the warehouse. The first question they ask him is whether he's remembered the bread. No, he hasn't. He crouches before the door to the front office to make himself as small as possible and crawls on his hands and knees to the steel cabinet, takes out the bread and starts to leave. At any rate, that's what he intends to do, but before he knows what's happened, Mushi has jumped over him and gone to sit under the desk. Peter looks all around him. Aha, there's the cat. He crawls back into the office and grabs the cat by the tail. Mushi hisses. Peter sighs. What has he accomplished? Mushi now sitting by the window, licking herself, very pleased at having escaped Peter's clutches. Peter has no choice but to lure her with a piece of bread. Mushi takes the bait, follows him out, and the door closes. I watch the entire scene through a crack in the window. Mr. Van Dan is angry and slams the door. Margot and I exchange looks and think the same thing. He must have worked himself into a rage again because of some blunder on Mr. Kugler's part, and he's forgotten all about the cake company next door. Another step is heard in the hallway. Dussel comes in, goes towards the window with an air of propriety, sniffs, coughs, sneezes, and clears his throat. He's out of luck. It was Pepper. He continues on to the front office. The curtains are open, which means he can't get at his writing paper. He disappears with a scowl. Margot and I exchange another glance. One less page for his sweetheart tomorrow, I hear her say. I nod in agreement. An elephant's tread is heard on the stairway. It's Dussel, seeking comfort in his favorite spot. We continue working. Knock, knock, knock. 3 taps means dinner time. Monday, August 23rd, 1943. Margot and Mother are nervous. Shh. Father, be quiet. Otto, shh, Pim. It's 8:30. Come here. You can't run the water anymore. Walk softly. A sample of what's said to Father in the bathroom at the stroke of 8:30. He has to be in the living room. No running water, no flushing toilet, no walking around, no noise whatsoever. As long as the office staff hasn't arrived, sounds travel more easily to the warehouse. The door opens upstairs at 8:20, and this is followed by 3 gentle taps on the floor. Anne's hot cereal. I clamber up the stairs to get my doggy dish. Back downstairs. Everything has to be done quickly. I comb my hair, put away the potty, shove the bed back in place. Quiet. The clock is striking 8:30. Miss Van D changes shoes and shuffles through the room in her slippers. Mr. Van D, too, a veritable Charlie Chaplin. All is quiet. The ideal family scene has now reached its high point. I want to read or study, and Margot does too. Father and Mother ditto. Father is sitting with Dickens and the dictionary, of course, on the edge of the sagging, squeaky bed, which doesn't even have a decent mattress. 2 bolsters can be piled up on top of each other. I don't need these, he thinks. I can manage without them. Once he starts reading, he doesn't look up. He laughs now and then and tries to get Mother to read a passage. I don't have the time right now. He looks disappointed, but then continues to read. A little while later, when he comes across another interesting bit, he tries again. "You have to read this, Mother." Mother sits on the folding bed, either reading, sewing, knitting, or studying, whichever is next on her list. An idea suddenly occurs to her, and she quickly says so as not to forget. "And remember to, Margot, jot this down." After a while, it's quiet again. Margot slams her book shut. Father knits his forehead, his eyebrows forming a funny curve, and his wrinkle of concentration reappearing at the back of his head, and he buries himself in his book again. Mother starts chatting with Margot, and I get curious and listen too. Pym is drawn into the conversation. 9 o'clock. Breakfast. Friday, September 10th, 1943. Dearest Kitty, every time I write to you, something special has happened, usually unpleasant rather than pleasant. This time, however, something wonderful is going on. On Wednesday, September 8th, we are listening to the 7 o'clock news when we heard an announcement. Here is some of the best news of the war so far. Italy has capitulated. Italy has unconditionally surrendered. The Dutch broadcast from England began at 8:15, with the news. Listeners, an hour and 15 minutes ago, just as I finished writing my daily report, we received the wonderful news of Italy's capitulation. I tell you, I never tossed my notes into the waste paper basket with more delight than I did today. God Save the King, the American national anthem, and the Russian International were played. As always, the Dutch program was uplifting without being too optimistic. The British have landed in Naples. Northern Italy is occupied by the Germans. The truce was signed on Friday, September 7th, the day the British landed in Italy. The Germans are ranting and raving in all the newspapers of the treachery of the Bandolier and the Italian king. Still, there's bad news as well. It's about Mr. Kleinman. As you know, we all like him very much. He's unfailingly cheerful and amazingly brave, despite the fact that he's always sick and in pain and can't eat much or do a lot of walking. When Mr. Kleinman enters the room, the sun begins to shine, Mother said recently, and she's absolutely right. Now it seems he has to go to the hospital for a very difficult operation on his stomach, and will have to stay there for at least 4 weeks. You should have seen him when he told us goodbye. He acted so normally, as though he were just off to do an errand. Yours, Anne. Thursday, September 16th, 1943. Dearest Kitty, relationships here in the annex are getting worse all the time. We don't dare open our mouths at mealtime except to slip in a bite of food, because no matter what we say, someone is bound to resent it or take it the wrong way. Mr. Feskool occasionally comes to visit us. Unfortunately, he's not doing very well. He isn't making it any easier for his family, because his attitude seems to be, what do I care? I'm going to die anyway. When I think how touchy everyone is here, I can imagine what it must be like at the Voskuils. I've been taking valerian every day to fight the anxiety and depression, but it doesn't stop me from being even more miserable the next day. A good hearty laugh would help more than 10 valerian drops, but we've almost forgotten how to laugh. Sometimes I'm afraid my face is going to sag with all the sorrow, and that my mouth is going to permanently droop at the corners. The others aren't doing any better. Everyone here is dreading the great terror known as winter. Another fact that doesn't exactly brighten up our days is that Mr. Van Maren, the man who works in the warehouse, is getting suspicious about the annex. A person with any brains must have noticed by now that Meep sometimes says he's going to the lab, Bep to the file room, and Mr. Kleinman to the Opeta supplies, while Mr. Kluger claims the annex doesn't belong to the building at all, but to the one next door. We wouldn't care what Mr. Van Maren thought of the situation, except that he's known to be unreliable and to possess a high degree of curiosity. He's not one who can be put off with a flimsy excuse. One day Mr. Kluger wanted to be extra cautious, so at 12:12, he put on his coat and went to the drugstore around the corner. Less than 5 minutes later, he was back, and he sneaked up the stairs like a thief to visit us. At 1:15, he started to leave, but Bep met him on the landing and warned him that Van Maren was in the office. Mr. Kluger did an about-face and stayed with us until 1:30. Then he took off his shoes and went into the stockinged feet, despite his cold, to the front attic and down the other stairway, taking one step at a time to avoid the creaks. It took him 15 minutes to negotiate the stairs, but he wound up safely in the office after having entered from the outside. In the meantime, Bep had gotten rid of Van Maren and come to get Mr. Kluger from the annex, but he'd already left, and at that moment was still tiptoeing down the stairs. What must the passerbys have thought when they saw the manager putting on his shoes outside? Hey, you there, in the socks. Yours, Anne. Wednesday, September 29th, 1943. Dearest Kitty, It's Miss Van Dan's birthday. Other than one ration stamp each for the cheese, meat, and bread, all she received from us was a jar of jam. Her husband, Dussel, and the office staff gave her nothing but flowers and also food. Such are the times we live in. Beth had a nervous fit last week because she has so many errands to do. 10 times a day people are sending her out for something, each time insisting she go right away, or go again, or that she done it all wrong. And when you think that she has her regular office work to do, that Mr. Kleinman is sick, that Meep is home with a cold, and that Beth herself has a sprained ankle, boyfriend troubles, and a grouchy father, it's no wonder she is at the end of her tether. We comforted her and told her that if she'd put her foot down once or twice and say she didn't have the time, the shopping list would shrink of their own accord. Saturday there was a big drama, the likes of which have never been seen here before. It started with a discussion of Van Maren and ended in a general argument and tears. Dussel complained to Mother that he was being treated like a leper, that no one was friendly to him, and that after all he hadn't done anything to deserve it. This was followed by a lot of sweet talk, which luckily Mother didn't fall for this time. She told him we were disappointed in him, and that on more than one occasion he'd been a source of great annoyance. Dussel promised her the moon, but as usual we haven't seen so much as a beam. There's trouble brewing with the Van Dans, I can tell. Father's furious because they're cheating us. They've been holding back meat and other things. Oh, what kind of bombshell is about to burst now? If only I weren't so involved in all these skirmishes. If only I could leave here. They're driving us crazy. Yours, Anne. Sunday, October 17th, 1943. Dearest Kitty. Mr. Kleinman is back, thank goodness. He looks a bit pale, and yet he cheerfully set off to sell some clothes for Mr. Van Dan. The disagreement fact is that Mr. Van Dan has run out of money. He lost his last 100 guilders in the warehouse, which is still creating trouble for us. The men are wondering how 100 guilders could wind up in the warehouse on a Monday morning. Suspicion abounds. Meanwhile, the 100 guilders have been stolen. Who's the thief? But I was talking about the money shortage. Miss Van D has scads of dresses, coats, and shoes, none of which she feels she can do without. Mr. Van D's suit is difficult to sell, and Peter's bike has put on the block, but it's back again since nobody wanted it. But the story doesn't end there. You see, Miss Van D is going to have to part with her fur coat. In her opinion, the firm should pay for our upkeep, but that's ridiculous. They just had a flaming row about it and have entered the oh, my sweet Patooey and darling Curly stage of reconciliation. My mind boggles at the profanity this honorable house has had to endure in the past month. Father walks around with his lips pressed together, and whether he hears his name he looks up in alarm as if he's afraid he'll be called upon to resolve another delicate problem. Mother's so wrought up her cheeks are blotched with red. Margot complains of headaches. Dussel can't sleep. Miss Van D frets and fumes all day long, and I've gone completely round the bend. To tell you the truth, I sometimes forget who we're at odds with and who we're not. The only way to take my mind off of it is to study, and I've been doing a lot of that lately. Yours, Anne. Friday, October 29th, 1943. My dearest Kitty. Mr. Kleinman is out again. His stomach won't give him a moment of peace. He doesn't know whether it stopped bleeding. He came to tell us he wasn't feeling well and was going home, and for the first time he seemed really down. Mr. and Miss Van D have had more raging battles. The reason is simple. They're broke. They wanted to sell an overcoat and a suit of Mr. Van D's, but were unable to find any buyers. His prices were way too high. Some time ago, Miss Kleinman was talking about a furrier he knows. They gave Miss Van D the idea of selling his wife's fur coat. It's made of rabbit skin, and she's had it for 17 years. Miss Van D got 325 guilders for it, an enormous amount. She wanted to keep the money herself to buy new clothes after the war, and it took some doing before Mr. Van D could make her understand that it was desperately needed to cover household expenses. You can't imagine the screaming, shouting, stamping of feet, and swearing that went on. It was terrifying. My family stood holding its breath at the bottom of the stairs in case it might be necessary to drag them apart. All the bickering, tears, and nervous tension have become such a stress and strain that I fall into my bed at night crying and thanking my lucky stars that I have half an hour to myself. I'm doing fine, except I've got no appetite. I keep hearing, goodness, you look awful. I must admit, they're doing their best to keep me in condition. They're plying me with dextrose, cod liver oil, brewer's yeast, and calcium. My nerves often get the better of me, especially on Sundays, when That's when I really feel miserable. The atmosphere is stifling, sluggish, leaden. Outside you don't hear a single bird, and a deathly oppressive silence hangs over the house and clings to me as if it were going to drag me into the deepest regions of the underworld. At times like these, Father, Mother, and Margot don't matter to me in the least. I wander from room to room, climb up and down the stairs, and feel like a songbird whose wings have been ripped off, and who keeps hurling itself against the bars of its dark cage. Let me out, where there's fresh air and laughter. A voice within me cries. I don't even bother to reply anymore, but lie down on the divan. Sleep makes the silence and the terrible fear go by more quickly, helps pass the time, since it's impossible to kill it. Yours, Anne.